Thank you everybody for joining us today on this webinar about Act 129. Before we get started, I want to provide you with some logistical information. Make sure you get online while we talk so you can access the visual component of this presentation. You should have received an email from the Housing Alliance yesterday with instructions. First, click the ReadyTalk link, enter your name, email address, and click register, and you will be given access to the meeting. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type them in using the chat feature in the lower left-hand screen, and we will try to address your questions as they are asked. At the end, we will also open up the line for discussion of the webinar and make sure all questions are addressed. Finally, the PowerPoint presentation will be sent out after the webinar today. So we have with us today Patrick Cicero, who is Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Utility Law Project, also known as PULP in Harrisburg, PA, where he provides advocacy training, consultation, and support services in energy and utility matters affecting low-income residents of Pennsylvania. Patrick serves as chairman of the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, also known as the LIHEAP, Advisory Committee to the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services. He also sits as a member of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, Consumer Advisory Council, and the Weatherization and Energy Conservation Policy Advisory Council to the Department of Community and Economic Development. Prior to joining PULP, Patrick worked as a staff attorney for nearly 5 years at Mid-Penn Legal Services, where he led their consumer unit and focused on consumer and housing issues. Patrick also worked for 3.5 years as the Judicial Law Clerk to the Honorable Sylvia H. Rambo, United States District Court for the Middle District of Pennsylvania. Patrick has served as a lecturer at Pennsylvania State University, Dickinson School of Law, and the Pennsylvania Bar Institute, and is the visiting lecturer and adjunct professor at Messiah College. Patrick received his JD from Temple University, Beasley School of Law in 2002, and his BA from Messiah College in 1999. Next, we also have with us Michael Turns. He's a senior program manager with PSD Consulting, working out of their Philadelphia office. He manages a variety of residential new construction programs in Pennsylvania and is the principal investigator for the DOE-funded Residential Energy Code Field Study in Pennsylvania, a project to determine whether an investment in building energy code education, training, and outreach can produce a significant change in residential building energy savings. Previously, Mike was the Associate Director of the Pennsylvania Housing Research Center, PHRC, at Penn State University. So we're very excited to have both Patrick and Mike on the call today. Should be a really interesting webinar, and so we're going to get started. Patrick is going to lead us off.
Thank you, Tori. I look forward to entertaining any questions that folks may have as I go, and look forward to hearing Michael's presentation as well after I conclude. I'm going to provide kind of an overview and outline of what Act 129 is and what it does, and specifically some of the plans for each of the utility companies, each of the 7 utility companies, electric distribution utility companies that is, that are located throughout the state in Pennsylvania. So my presentation starts with an agenda, and this agenda is for my presentation. Doesn't include Michael's. I'm going to give a brief summary of what we do, what Act 129 is, what each utility is doing in the state of Pennsylvania, and what they will be doing come June 1st, 2017, or excuse me, 2016. And what other energy efficiency resources might be available to you and the properties with which you work. So to begin, let's talk about who is PULP. As Tori mentioned, PULP is the Pennsylvania Utility Law Project. You can see that we're a statewide entity located within the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network. Of interest to the housing world, we're also a part of Regional Housing Legal Services, and RHLS, many of you know, provides technical assistance and representation to community-based organizations developing affordable housing. PULP is located within RHLS, and so we have a fairly intimate connection with the affordable housing world. Our focus, however, unlike the other attorneys within Regional Housing Legal Services is a focus on low-income residential utility and energy affordability in Pennsylvania. We tend to represent groups and individuals before state agencies, including the Public Utility Commission, the Department of Community and Economic Development, and the Department of Human Services on utility and energy matters in Pennsylvania. Like this webinar, we also provide training and technical assistance, both to the legal aid programs as well as community groups. If you have any questions about PULP, please let me know. My contact information is contained at the end of the slides. So what is Act 129? It's a strange name for something that deals with energy efficiency, but Act 129 is an act of the General Assembly that was passed in 2008. And it places on each of the 7 electric distribution companies in Pennsylvania, and the 7 electric distribution companies in Pennsylvania are PECO, PPL, Duquesne Light, MET-Ed, Penelec, Penn Power, and West Penn Power. And each of those 7 large electric distribution companies, there are certainly others, but each of those 7 large electric distribution companies since 2008 have had energy efficiency and demand response, that is kind of curtailing usage, requirements for all of their customers. The first programming began in 2010, and there have been 2 phases of energy efficiency programming since then. We're currently in what's known as Phase 2 of Act 129, which ends at the end of this month. And so I'm not going to spend much time at all talking about what may be available between now and the end of May, but I am going to spend some time talking about what's going to be available in what is known as Phase 3 of Act 129. And these phases, Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, are all about what the Public Utility Commission has established as the energy conservation requirements for each of the electric companies. This third phase, which begins June 1st, 2016, will continue for 5 years through May of 2021. So it's going to provide a good example of what it is that may be available to multifamily affordable housing in this next 5-year period of time. Each of these plans were subject to approval by the Public Utility Commission. What was required was that each electric distribution company file a plan with the Public Utility Commission. That plan was submitted to the Office of Administrative Law Judge within the PUC, and it was subject to litigation where parties, including PULP on behalf of its clients, intervened and litigated as to what the plan should require. For PULP's perspective, what the plans should require was a specific targeting for low-income customers in general, but as well as, for the purposes of the audience here today, a specific targeting of low-income customers who reside in multifamily affordable housing. And so before I get into that, I want to talk about some of the challenges that are associated with targeting energy efficiency to multifamily affordable housing in Pennsylvania. As all of you know and are intimately familiar with, given your various roles, multifamily housing stock in Pennsylvania is aging. This presents a significant opportunity for improving the energy efficiency of these buildings. From our perspective, improving the energy efficiency of these buildings has 2 goals and 2 values. One is it increases the affordability of utility services for the residents if those units are individually metered, meaning that the resident, him or herself, is responsible for the payment of the utility bills. It also improves the health, comfort, and well-being of the residents, including various health and safety measures and improvements of indoor air quality. And from the perspective of the multifamily affordable housing world, it improves kind of the long-term viability of these projects because particularly in master metered properties, that is properties where there's one utility bill for heat or electricity or water, conservation and energy efficiency of those services will improve the cash flow and the ability of those projects to continue to house low-income residents for a longer period of time. This, however, has been a significantly underserved sector. Utilities have found it difficult to reach multifamily affordable housing properties for a variety of reasons. One such reason is what is known as the split incentive, and that's a disincentive perhaps for owners of the affordable housing complex to invest in significant energy efficiency upgrades to the building where tenants pay the utility bills. The tenants would receive the savings. Those savings may, depending on the way utility allowance is calculated, lead to an increase in the ability of the housing unit to collect more rent, but they may not. It will depend. And so there's a split incentive about who pays for these energy efficiency upgrades. More often, however, not just the split incentive, there's often a lack of capital. And so one of the things that we wanted to try to address in the context of these proceedings is how to get at that lack of capital. And you'll see what we've tried to do in terms of providing greater rebates and greater payment by the utility for energy efficiency upgrades here in a moment. The third barrier was there was often a lack of alignment between what the needs of the affordable multifamily housing community were and the offerings that the utility companies were making. When Act 129 first began, much of the efficiency upgrades were lighting measures. There were few deep shell measures. There were fewer appliance replacement programs. They tended to be lighting measures and appliance recycling programs, both of which are good, but both of which didn't necessarily, neither of which necessarily aligned with what the utilities, with what the affordable housing community wanted to do. In addition to the lack of alignment of utility program offerings, there was a timing issue, and that dealt with when, depending on how an affordable multifamily housing unit is funded, when they needed commitments by the utilities for the installation and availability of rebates. We've tried to address each of these issues, as you'll see as I move forward. The last kind of barrier or historic challenge has been a difference in terms of who characterizes a household as low income. In the utility world, the Public Utility Commission has determined that the term low-income household is limited to only those households residing at or below 150% of the federal poverty level. And this conflicts with the affordable housing world's use of area median income thresholds. So depending on the composition of the units, these definitions may not jive. So we can get into that in a moment as well. So I want to give a brief overview of the successes generally throughout these plans, and then I'm going to talk specifics about each of the plans fairly briefly, and we'll be available to answer questions. We were able to get the utilities to shift about $6 million over this 5-year period from what they had just been educational programming, sending out letters to and home energy reports to households, to direct installation measures for households. More specifically, however, we were able to, across the state over the 5-year period, get the utilities to dedicate a little more than $32 million specifically for multifamily housing. And that's about half of that is specifically dedicated to multifamily housing where the tenant pays the utility bill, and the other half is dedicated to those multifamily housing units that are master metered. And as you'll see, that's specific. Those are specific dedicated budgets to multifamily housing, and it does not preclude either low-income tenants or multifamily housing units from taking advantage of other offerings. The other significant success that we got is that each utility, and you're going to be hearing more about this from the Housing Alliance as we move on, each utility has agreed to hold a series of stakeholder meetings with interested multifamily housing owners, developers, and other interested individuals to solicit feedback about A, the utilities program and its offerings, and B, from my perspective and most significantly, the needs of the multifamily housing community. Each of these stakeholder meetings has to be done within the period of June 1, 2016 to by no later than December of 2016. We believe in our targeting, trying to get utilities to target the fall timeframe September, early October timeframe for the holding of these meetings. So that, and each of these meetings, again, will be located in the utility service territory of the utility. So for PECO folks, they'll be located in Philadelphia and the surrounding suburban counties, and again, in each of the specific utility service territories. The reason for this is so that multifamily housing owners residing there, working or operating within those utility service territories will have an opportunity to solicit input and feedback. And we highly encourage you to participate in this. It's essential to the ongoing nature and potential revisions of these plans. In addition to those changes, again, as a broad overview, these are applicable to all of the programs, which is why I'm discussing them at the beginning in terms of an overview. In addition to those wins, we were able to get each of the utilities to agree to align their energy efficiency offerings with what the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency is requiring through its qualified allocation plan. So for those of you who are doing tax credit finance properties and you're going in for an allocation of tax credits either for new construction or rehabilitation, you know that PHFA has a QAP that requires certain energy efficiency measures, and each of the utilities have committed to say that their offerings will align so as to enable affordable housing developers to obtain rebates that will meet the PHFA QAP, at least as it's currently written, and then as it's continued to be updated. Another requirement for those LIHTC properties is the completion of an energy rebate analysis in PHFA's underwriting standards. And so each of the utilities have committed to have their property, their conservation service providers be aware of and assist with the completion of this energy rebate analysis to specifically detail what energy rebates may be available. Finally, in order to kind of ensure that the offerings are available regardless of meter type, so for those units that are individually metered tenant paid, that there are certain offerings available, and those common areas of those buildings would nonetheless have the ability to participate in energy efficiency programs, or in the master meter context. The utilities have committed to either using a common conservation service provider to provide both commercial and residential energy efficiency in these buildings, or if they cannot use a common provider, they've committed to having someone within the utility who can be able to coordinate the visits for the providers of these services in the context of a particular unit. So I want to talk a little bit now about what each of the utilities has committed to do in their plans. And again, these are prospective commitments that begin on June 1st and extend through 2021. First, let's start with PECO, which is located in Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. They've committed a budget of $13 million, and this is the $13 million figure that I'm giving is a budget that is committed to multifamily housing. Again, about half of that is for individually metered multifamily housing. The other half or so is committed to master metered housing. The reason that matters is because it comes from different ratepayer sources. The master metered money comes from the commercial industrial ratepayers, and the individually metered comes from the residential ratepayers. Nonetheless, we've gotten about $13 million from PECO for multifamily throughout that 5-year period. They have committed to a definition of multifamily that should be able to serve many different building types. So all buildings with more than one unit when the building is bigger than a duplex, right? So it has to be bigger than a duplex. But if it has 3 or more units, it will fall within the parameters of PECO's multifamily housing program. All the savings from the energy efficiency measures that are gained, and this is significant to PECO, it may not necessarily be significant to you as a provider, can be attributed to PECO's requirements to get a certain amount of savings from its low-income sector. And what they've done is they've determined that in individually metered tenant-paid utilities, they can confirm the income of the household. But in master metered owner-paid utilities, for those units receiving federal and state funding with long-term use restrictions, either site-based Section 8, LIHTC, Housing Authority, or other long-term use restrictions, they'll be working with the building owner to identify those units occupied with incomes at or below 150% of poverty. We hope this doesn't become a barrier to you. PHFA is committed to helping to facilitate the provision of this information, and we can talk more about that if folks have questions. The significant victory here is that both individually and master metered properties are eligible for all measures in either portfolio. So PECO and all the utilities have a list of available measures that are available to residential properties, right? So units, an apartment itself, whether it's refrigerators, hot water heaters, etc. And even if the property is master metered, and even if the measure is not listed on the commercial industrial side of their program, if it's listed on the residential and low-income side, and the property in question is an affordable multifamily housing building, then the measure is applicable and able to be used by that building. For common areas of individually metered buildings, if 2/3 or more of the units are occupied by verified low-income buildings, then the common areas are eligible for the same subsidy as the low-income energy efficiency program. And this matters because the subsidy for the low-income energy efficiency program is that PECO will pay 100% of the cost. So in those buildings where you're housing extremely low-income people at or below 150% of poverty, and 2/3 of them are verified to be at that threshold, even the common areas that are paid for by the landlord itself will be able to be paid for at 100% of cost by PECO. The units of those individuals, even if it's not 2/3 or greater, the units of those individuals who are residing in multifamily properties, master metered or individually metered, are eligible for the same subsidy. That is, even if the landlord pays the bill in these affordable multifamily housing properties, if the unit is occupied by a household that is at or below 150% of poverty, then the full cost of all applicable measures that can be installed are paid for by PECO. Moving on to PPL. PPL has a similar program with a few differences. They have a much smaller budget that's dedicated to multifamily housing. It's only $2.5 million, but the total low-income sector budget is $40 million. And so residential and low-income customers, that is individuals who are paying their bills, are eligible to take advantage of part of that $40 million budget. The $2.5 million is dedicated to the master meter carve-out. So PPL has said, look, for low-income customers in individually metered and master metered multifamily tenant units occupied by those at 150% or below, you can take advantage of the low-income sector, part of that $40 million budget. For common areas and for master metered buildings, there's a $2.5 million cap currently on what is available. But what is available to those units at significant discount. The efficient equipment, the custom rebates, and efficient lighting. If the unit meets that 2/3 threshold again, would be available at 100% paid by PPL. Moving on more rapidly to the first energy companies, which includes MedEd, Penelec, Penn Power, and West Penn Power. And the next slide has the program budgets on, and you'll be able to see the program budgets for each service territory. But similar to PPL, the first energy companies have said for residential and low income, sectors, those sectors that are paid for by those rate classes, there is a availability of those programs for individually metered tenant-paid utilities. And tenants in master metered properties and common areas of individually metered properties fall into the commercial industrial sector. The significance here is, unlike the other companies, FirstEnergy was less willing to commit to paying the full cost for common areas and for master metered properties. And what they've done is they've agreed to allow building owners to have a contribution of no more than 20% for measures installed in common areas or master meter buildings. That is 20% of the cost of the measure. And again, it's limited to those buildings where 2/3 or more of the units are occupied by low-income tenants. This is a discount over what would ordinarily be available. What would ordinarily be available in these units would be a contribution by the building owner of somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60%. So it is a deeper discount, but it is not a discount that is as generous or aggressive as either PICO or PPLs. FirstEnergy companies have committed that if in the first 2 years of this 5-year plan they're getting insufficient activity in this sector, that they would look to reduce that contribution from multifamily housing owners. You can see the budgets for each of the companies here. Again, the budget in the middle column is specifically dedicated for multifamily for a total of about $13 million across the companies over the 5-year period. And the budget sector on the right, the far right, is the low-income budget sector, which again is available for each of the properties that are individually metered, tenant-paid utilities, housing low-income individuals. Duquesne Light, which is the company located in Pittsburgh, has a $4.2 million set aside for multifamily, with the availability of other funds through the low-income sector. Again, there's two significant caveats. The first is that individually metered units in multifamily building, that is tenant-paid units, can be any size. They have what's called the low-income whole house retrofit program. It is their single-family residence program that they're going to adapt for units that are individually metered in multifamily housing. So it doesn't matter what size it is. It can be as small as a duplex for the low-income whole house retrofit program if it houses low-income persons meeting the 150% of poverty or below. For master metered properties, they have what is called the multifamily housing retrofit program, and this provides high-efficiency measures and financial incentives for the installation of lighting, shell measures, appliance replacement, and any other cost-effective energy efficiency measure that can be satisfied by an audit. Duquesne was unwilling to set a targeted contribution by the family or by the multifamily housing owner. What they've said is that incentive amounts can be negotiated on a case-by-case basis. All property owners are going to be required to contribute something, but depending on the number of low-income occupants of the residence, depending on the number and availability of financing from outside sources or revenue from outside sources, Duquesne is willing to work to establish fairly low thresholds for multifamily housing owners to participate. Very briefly, there are other programs available. LIRP is the Low-Income Usage Reduction Program, and it's offered by the utilities. You can see that there are significant benefits that are available there. Unfortunately, it's not available to master metered units. It's only available for individually metered units. If anyone has questions about LIRP, it is a very utility-specific program. I'm happy to answer questions that you have about them in the context of your specific utilities. The thing I want to mention very briefly, however, is the Weatherization Assistance Program, a program of which many of you are which many of you are aware. And that program is currently undergoing some revisions. Included in this year's WAP state plan, which is operated by the Department of Community and Economic Development, is a multifamily housing work group. which is designed to try to figure out how to address the needs of the multifamily housing community. There's going to be input needed, and if any of you are interested in participating in this multifamily housing work group, please let me know so that you can be added to this list and participate in calls to figure out how weatherization assistance money can effectively address the needs of the multifamily housing community. The last slide I have provides links to each of the Act 129 plans of each of the companies if you want to dig deeper into each of them. These are links to the actual plans as they currently exist. They'll be valid as long as those plans have not been amended, but you can always check the docket number that is associated with each of the plans and or call me at Pulp to talk through them. So I know I rushed through that. We don't have a whole lot of time. There's a lot to cover, and there are some questions that we'll try to get to here at the end of the presentation. I'll look through them as I turn the presentation over to Michael.
All right, thanks, Patrick. So thanks to the Housing Alliance, and thanks, Patrick, for the great overview of kind of the policy end of Act 129. So what I wanted to talk about today is more where the rubber meets the road and the implementation of these programs. So we're sort of at a good time to be talking about this, since as Patrick mentioned, Phase 3 starts on June 1st, so it's a good time to be thinking about what projects or what buildings you think might be good candidates for these programs moving forward. But it's also a little bit of an awkward time, as in some cases the contracts haven't been signed between the utilities and the implementer. So I'm going to keep things pretty general today, not talk about specific utility programs and their requirements, but sort of give an overview of what's out there and what's available and how to find out more about them. Okay, so PSD is a company. We call ourselves a technology-enabled program implementation company. So in our world, we just generically call them programs. In Pennsylvania, it's probably more accurately called an energy efficiency and conservation program implementer. So that's our main business, and across the bottom we have some of the types of programs that we are currently or have been involved with. So from residential audit programs to comprehensive whole house retrofit programs. My wheelhouse is the residential new construction and codes programs. Codes are not currently a part of Act 129 programs. They, in several other states, some support for code officials and builders in terms of meeting codes have been integrated into their program portfolios. Multifamily programs and new commercial buildings. So we are, like I said, program implementer. We also have some engineering services. We do software. If anybody's in the energy modeling kind of world, we do TREAT software that's used in a variety of places. It's taken off in New York with their programs especially. So that's PSD. And just to rehash, Patrick went over the 7 major electric distribution companies in Pennsylvania. Here we have a map in case you're not exactly sure where all of these are. So Duquesne Light around Pittsburgh here is the purple. And then First Energy owns Med-Ed, Penelec, Penn Power, West Penn Power. So that is the sort of lavender color that snakes through here and across the east coast of Pennsylvania. Penelec is the yellow. West Penn Power is Penn Power is the blue over here, and West Penn Power is the orange. PECO in Philadelphia and the surrounding counties, and PPL is the pinkish color there. So that's the overview, and these are the companies that are under Act 129 and have these state requirements to meet savings goals. So the utilities, more often than not, it's pretty rare that a utility is actively implementing the program on their own. So they hire conservation service providers. That was a term that Patrick mentioned briefly, or CSPs, to implement the programs. So PSD is one of these providers, but there are numerous providers that are involved in all the different programs across the state with the different EDCs. So it can get a little confusing because there may be different implementers for different programs, and the different utilities have different implementers. I'll go through where you can find information and what the best place to start. But in general, if everything that Patrick went through didn't quite sink in terms of what the programs are available for what types of projects or buildings, the implementer's role is to really guide you through the process. So all of the companies have toll-free numbers that act as a clearinghouse and can point you in the right direction to a specific program, and then the implementer of that program will then work with you to guide you through the whole process, from what are the eligibility requirements to how do you apply for the rebates, et cetera. So the implementer is really your guide. Implementers may also work with subcontractors and what in our industry are called trade allies. So these are people that are not necessarily directly in a contractual relationship with the program implementer or the electric company, but they're sort of free market, like energy auditors, HERS raters, those types of folks are out there and involved in these programs as well. I mean, really the starting point is to check out the websites and look at all of the programs. Again, they have a lot of these websites have some transitional language about programs ending. So some programs may be ending and new programs beginning. You may also have similar programs that just have been tweaked for Phase 3. So again, June 1st is when all of the websites are likely to be updated with the latest information in all the programs. But you can kind of poke around right now and see what they're saying. So Duquesne Light calls their whole portfolio, they have the Watt Choices program, and I'm not sure if that's appearing on the slide or not, but I put the long URL across the bottom. I'd recommend you just kind of Google the utility company and energy efficiency or energy conservation, and you'll wind up on these sites. So First Energy, they have one site, EnergySavePA.com, for all of their utility programs. So the MedEd, Penelec, Penn Power, West Penn Power, and again listing all of their programs. I think all of these sites have a For Your Home section and For Your Business section, and for the folks that are on this call, are probably sort of in between. It's like For Your Home, but it may not be your home exactly. So there may be some overlap in these programs. So PECO calls its portfolio the Smart Ideas program. Again, For Your Home, For Your Business, they have listings of all the programs that they offer and who to get in touch with to start guiding you through the process. PPL site is here, Save Energy and Money, listing out all of their programs. So I'd recommend that everybody just hop on Google and find these websites and start poking around now and thinking about what types of things you might be applying for, whether you own or manage existing buildings or you have projects coming up for new construction. Now's the time to start thinking about it. So I'm going to walk through a variety of the different types of programs. Patrick covered this a little bit, but I'll just sort of elaborate and provide a couple examples. So there are what are called in the industry direct install programs. So these are programs where the program implementer has staff or they work with trade allies to basically go into the units, the homes, or the common areas, and the program implementer purchases the bulbs, and they just come in and install them for you. So these are usually lighting programs and water fixtures. Since these are electric programs, the water measures are limited to units that have electric heat. But this is generally at no cost to either the resident or the owner. They're coming in, installing the bulbs, and yeah, it's hard to think of a reason not to participate in this type of program. So it's the Pico Smart Multifamily Solutions is one example of this type of program. And then we have equipment rebate programs. Some of these are for the building owners, and some of them are for homeowners and residents. So basically these are you purchase efficient equipment, and then generally there's a rebate form that you fill out and send into the program implementer and the electric company, and they'll write you a check for a rebate for whatever appliance. So it could be HVAC and water heating equipment. They do air conditioner units, dishwashers, refrigerators, anything you can think of. They have rebate programs. Some of the utility programs, I don't have a slide. They'll do what are called midstream programs, where they are paying like Home Depot and Lowe's, for example, to offer the equipment at a lower price. So you're actually getting it. You may not even know that you're getting a discount through Act 129, but when you go to some of the consumer retail outlets, the equipment and lighting products are cheaper than they would be without Act 129. And then there are comprehensive programs, and this is really what PSD focuses on. So the Act 129 does make reference that all of the EDCs should have some type of comprehensive program. I don't think the Act does a great job of really defining what that is, but in our interpretation and a lot of the utilities' interpretation, it's like whole building approaches, basically. So it's not just focusing on any single piece of the building, like insulation, or not just the furnace rebate or washing machine rebate. It's everything combined sort of into one measure. And so there are these programs. I'm going to focus on the residential side. There are programs for existing homes, audit or whole house retrofit programs. Usually they consist of both an audit component where they come in and look at the house, identify energy weaknesses, maybe do some software modeling, doing blower door and duct leakage testing for a full-blown audit. Some of the audits are simple, kind of like clipboard audits, you might call them, just looking at some basic items, and some are more comprehensive and complex with blower door duct leakage testing and combustion appliance testing. And then also some of these, as they're doing the audit, sometimes they do direct install work, so the auditor might come with some light bulbs and screw in some light bulbs while he or she is at the house. But then once the audit is complete, the auditor makes recommendations for improvements, and then they can get rebates for installing insulation, air sealing, new HVAC equipment, and a lot of times that's just based on the savings that they're projecting. So you can get one rebate for a combination of items that are installed. So that's the existing home side, and then my real focus personally is on residential new construction. For shorthand, we just call them new homes programs. And so all of the EDCs except Duquesne Light have offered new homes programs in the past and plan to offer rebates to builders in the future. So this is encouraging builders to construct more efficient new homes. So the baseline is the 2009 International Energy Conservation Code. So typically you have to have a certain percent above code in order to be eligible. Some of the programs have required Energy Star certification as well. And this is where you get good alignment. I guess I'll get to this later, but with these low-income housing tax credit projects. There's a trend in the state, across the state, for performance-based incentives. So these are a certain number of cents, maybe 30 or 35 cents per kilowatt hour saved. And so the typical incentives are $500 to $2,500 depending on what the fuel source is, how big the home is, and what the energy efficiency level of the home is. So that energy efficiency level is determined using the home energy rating system typically, or HERS. So a rater comes out and evaluates the house and gives the home a score, and I have a slide on that in a minute. But that's how the qualification and the percent above code is determined. So with PHFA and the low-income housing tax credit job, Patrick mentioned this energy rebate analysis. So it's a requirement that the owners of these projects or the person of record looks into these rebates and applies for these rebates where they're available. So if you're doing residential new construction projects, these new homes programs are usually limited to 3 stories and less, or 4 and 5 stories if there are separate HVAC equipment for each unit and separate water heating for each unit. Otherwise, they might fall into these other multifamily programs instead. So if you're involved in one of these tax credit projects, chances are you'll be reaching out to PSD and our staff, and we can walk you through how to apply for the rebates in your area. So these new homes programs, have been running for 3+ years for phase 2, and there was a phase 1 also before that. So all of these new homes programs have websites as well, and that's a good source of information. And you're going to probably see change over the next couple of weeks in these websites as we launch into phase 3 on June 1st. But so these new construction programs are covering, like I said, all of the states. So rebates are available everywhere except for Duquesne Light Territory currently. So a little bit about the HERS rating system, home energy rating system. I imagine a lot of folks on this call, the affordable housing community tends to be pretty conscious about energy efficiency because obviously, the resident has to be able to afford the ongoing expenses of living there. So a lot of these affordable housing projects are efficient, and that's a great thing, and it also makes you eligible for these rebate programs. So as you're building new homes, definitely consider this. Start working with a rater. But the home energy rating system gives you a score. A standard new home receives a score of 100 on the HERS index, and then the lower the better. So each percent is basically a percent less energy use. So we created this diagram with some of the typical incentives that you might get with programs across the state. So if you're doing Energy Star, maybe you have like a $750 incentive. If you are doing the Zero Energy Ready Home program, maybe more like $1,500, and Passive House, maybe like $2,000 or up to that $2,500 or so area. So not all of the programs require these certifications, but these are nice kind of marketing tools and just help help guide you through the process with these programs to make sure that you are constructing a quality building. So this same system is used to determine, the 15 to 30% above code or savings over code that these programs require. So the general process for these new homes rebates is to find a rater, first of all. That rater will do a preliminary software analysis based on your plans. Then if you need to modify the design to qualify for the program, you can do that. And then you build the home. There are a series of inspections and testing, so pre-drywall inspection looking at insulation and air barriers, and then final inspections and testing. So this is a blower door testing, duct leakage testing, and a final inspection. All of this is plugged into the software program. If it deviates at all from the preliminary software analysis, it's kind of trued up at the end to reflect the actual building and the results of the testing. And then it's usually up to the rater to submit the job to the program, and it's the builder hires the rater to do all of this for them. So that's the new homes overview, and my last slide here is if you've never been involved with a HERS rater, the Penn Energy Codes program is that DOE Residential Energy Code field study that was mentioned in my bio. So we're running this program across eastern Pennsylvania, and so if you're in PICO, PPL, or MEDED territory and you've never worked with a rater but are interested in doing so, we're offering free consultations with those raters, and they can provide you what's essentially a rating on your home. We're not requiring them to declare an official rating because there's some additional costs that come along with that. But the program is paying raters to go out and provide these free consultations with builders or developers so they can understand where their current projects or where their previous projects or one that they have planned, where they're coming out in terms of percent above code, or how close are they to meeting Energy Star, or what the HERS rating is, what the HERS index score is. So you can find these vouchers and download them at pennenergycodes.com. So one free consultation for every builder or developer, if you haven't worked with a rater previously or recently anyway. So that's really the quick overview from the implementation side and how to get involved. Again, the websites are the starting point. I have my contact info here, so particularly with these residential new construction programs, get in touch with me and I will help to guide you through that process. So looking forward to hearing some of you, and hopefully we can get some money in your hands. And by the way, with these low-income housing tax credit jobs, that's if the utilities are paying for these energy upgrades, that frees up more cash for additional affordable housing projects. So I think everybody kind of wins there. The utilities help meet their goals, and the state gets more funding for affordable housing.
Great, thank you, Mike. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Patrick, as well. So now I'm going to open up the line so people can ask questions. So I'm going to do that right now. We have about 5 minutes for questions.
The conference has been unmuted.
I think it was trying to figure out how to consolidate or how to balance
the money that's available to multi and it's possible to utilities versus where it's I'm sorry, does anyone have a question? Yeah. If you could sure, go for it.
I could see a shadow. I could see a shadow. I hope I don't have to talk on this because they can't hear me.
Okay, so I can hear some background noise, so I'm going to mute the lines, and then I see that there's a couple of questions here that were submitted, so I'll just ask those questions to the group.
The conference has been muted.
So the first question is, what is an efficient fixture? And I'm just going to, sorry, I'm just going to just have to open it back up or unmute the presenters.
Am I live here with
Oh,
you?
great, thanks. Yes.
Okay, so efficient water fixture, it's a lower flow rate, so lower gallons per minute. So there are faucet aerators that get you down to like 1 gallon per minute. There are shower head fixtures that 1.5 gallons per minute. So you're saving water, but you're also saving electricity for the electrically heated, for if you have electric water heaters. At the same time, because you're using less hot water, using less energy to heat it up. So so faucet aerators and shower heads are the efficient fixtures.
Great, thanks. Another question, Mike, am I hearing that for my new construction elevator building, DUQ has no rebates to offer?
So all I'm really confident in speaking about is these new homes programs, which are limited to the 3 stories and below, or 4 and 5 stories with individually heated and cooled and hot water heating in the units. So as far as bigger buildings that may have elevators, I'm not actually familiar enough with Duquesne Light's portfolio to answer that question. Maybe Patrick knows.
This is Patrick. I think the answer is that it might depend on whether or not it depends on how large the building might be. Duquesne Light is committed in its multifamily offerings and master metered units to work with developers on custom rebates. So I think that I'm not convinced that they're not going to do it, but it may be a custom rebate and a custom product. And I guess what I would say is, if you're having difficulty with them, let us know. And one of the things that we do and can do is potentially intervene and see if we can get something figured out with Duquesne Light.
Great. Any more questions? If you have any more questions, one more. Are there any Act 129 incentives related to solar conversion?
This is a hard question to answer. The short answer is there aren't any Act 129 incentives that I'm aware of that look at solar panels on roofs. There has been some talk about having things like solar hot water heating and other measures added, but the short answer is no, there aren't Act 129 incentives for solar installation on installed solar panels on roofs.
I'd have to investigate a little further, but I mean, solar does contribute to the HERS rating and is incorporated in that. I just have to make sure that there weren't double dipping issues with maybe other programs or other things that the utilities are doing. But it's possible with this whole house measure that PV would factor into your overall energy savings.
So Mike, you're
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Patrick.
No, I just want to make sure you're suggesting that it maybe as a custom program it may work.
Or not exactly a custom program, but these new homes programs where they're comprehensive and you
Right.
do energy modeling on all of the different end uses of the entire building, and if you're hooking in a PV array, that's all factored into the energy analysis that the rater is doing. So that could be considered savings. But again, I don't want to say that that's for sure. I would have to investigate whether that was acceptable or not.
So it is now 1 o'clock, so we are going to wrap up and end the webinar. Again, thank you to Mike and Patrick for getting on the phone today and talking about this Act 129. It's really relevant right now. And thank you everybody else for getting on the phone and spending your time with us. Again, we're going to send out the PowerPoint after today or Monday, and then we'll also have the recording available online. Thanks again, and have a great one.